public utility is, quote, unjustifiably generous with its executive compensation and plans to vote against the current pay packages. For more on what can actually be done over at Hydro One, we're joined by the J.R. Kimber Chair of Investor Protection and Corporate Governance at the University of Toronto, Anita Anand. Anita, nice to have you with us. So we've watched this story unfolding in a few pieces in recent weeks, but tell us a little bit more about the corporate governance side of this. What can they be discussing in the boardroom, given the concerns of a major shareholder like the Government of Ontario?
The board's sole responsibility regarding the CEO is the appointment of the CEO and the retention of the CEO, and that includes the compensation of the CEO. And so with regards to Mayo Schmidt, the Ontario Hydro Board has a responsibility to undertake that role. The key consideration that the press really hasn't picked up so far is that Mayo Schmidt is on the board of Hydro One. So he's in the boardroom when these discussions are taking place, and I am assuming he would be recusing himself from the vote on the matter.
Let's go through a couple of numbers that people have been citing a lot. One is his compensation package at more than $6 million. The other is what he would get if he was terminated. Severance package being north of $10 million.
Yes.
So you're saying him being in the boardroom means that he's got some say on both of those numbers?
Sure, let me clarify.
Sure.
He's on the board, and he's generally speaking in the boardroom. I am assuming that he would recuse himself from discussions about his own pay package. But the fact that the CEO is on the board is at least somewhat questionable governance practices. You see many companies today not putting their CEO on the board, and certainly not having their CEO as chair of the board. That is definitely something companies don't do anymore.
Now, sometimes the party that is taking issue with pay is an activist investor. Somebody who doesn't like what's been happening at the company and points to what's happening in the boardroom, and they want change. In this case, though, even though a large shareholder, being the government, is voicing disapproval, most people in Canada who heard this story coming to the surface probably heard the PC leader in Ontario, Doug Ford, speaking directly about the pay package for Mr. Schmidt as raising awareness. Is that unusual to see it coming out of the political arena as opposed to the activist investor arena?
Excellent point. So the Ontario government is a 47% shareholder in Hydro One, and the analogy to the world of activist investors is appropriate. There is somewhat of a responsibility to ensure that the pay package and other votes that are coming before the board are monitored, are overseen, are scrutinized, and certainly that arises with regards to exec compensation.
What about the flip side to this? The flip side that governments can take stakes in businesses that are publicly traded, and companies that are public and big sometimes have to provide decent pay packages to top leaders to get them to commit to a job. Is there a sentiment around this business that because of what the government's ownership stake is, that it becomes a bit of a juggling act for people? In other words, some people who have shied away from investing in this business for these very issues.
Well, I imagine that the point you're raising is what is the level of accountability of the major shareholder in this organization, and does this in turn have an effect on who wants to invest in the entity?
And in addition, recruitment. I mean, presumably this company wants to continue to get high-profile executives to come to Hydro One because they're competing with other businesses around the world. And are they impacted by this story in their ability to recruit people?
Listen, Doug Ford's been saying that he would fire the CEO and fire the board. I think that's a very strong and brash statement. When corporate governance issues arise, the first move is not to completely fire and disband the governance structure. Whether reform is necessary is another question, and I think David Dennison, as chair of the board, is doing the right thing. Let's move. Let's examine executive compensation.
Do you think something will come from this review, this examination by the board?
I do.
What do you think is the most likely thing to happen?
They are here hiring independent experts to review the compensation package, and it's possible that the board will take another vote on whether that pay package should indeed go forward, and if it does go forward in the short term, what it should look like in the long term.
What's your general view on a payment of more than $10 million for sort of a situation where there's severance? Does that seem high to you? This
is an anomalous company. This is not a publicly listed company the way you have with Microsoft or Google. This is a utility, and so we can't use the same metrics with this organization. What we have to have trust in is that the board of directors, and they are a very reputable board, is exercising its duty to act in the best interests of the organization as a whole, and ask themselves, therefore, whether this pay package is indeed in the best interests of the corporation as a whole, not the major shareholder, but the corporation.
All right. Lots to watch for. And we should also point out that we do have requests to Doug Ford and the energy minister here in Ontario.
That would be great.
We'll see what they have to say as well. It's great to hear what you have to say on this important issue. Anita Anand, corporate governance expert and professor of law at the University of